Hi, it's me. Welcome back to another new ID overview for Limbus Company's Season 7. This week saw the addition of two new triple-out IDs in the House of Spiders, the Ring Nursefather Honglu, and the House of Spiders, the Ring Apprentice Faust, both of whom are hybrid bleed and charge IDs. They're both pretty bonkers powerful, and while their kits are really complicated in that they have more than double the amount of skills that most IDs do, they aren't actually as complicated as they look. That said, there is still a lot to get through, so I'd rather not waste more time and instead jump right into their kits and show you exactly why these are two of the best IDs currently in the game. First off, both the House of Spiders, the Ring Apprentice Faust, and the Ring Nursefather Honglu base their mechanics off of Corpus Ingredient, a new type of unique charge. It's functionally identical to charge, and they gain it instead of charge count whenever they would gain it, but they have almost no skills that specifically have effects that do gain it. Instead, on top of gaining 2 count for every ring ID at the start of an encounter, including themselves, they always gain 5 Corpus Ingredient if they deal damage with a base skill at the end of that skill, and another 3 if that skill killed the target. Just like other charge potency IDs, the potency increases by 1 for every 10 that you spend, and once you reach 2 potency, Faust will gain Artwork Fascia in addition. Fascia's effects scale based on how much Corpus Ingredient potency that Faust has, and once you gain it, all of her base attack skills and her clashable counter gain 1 base power and deal 10% more damage against targets with bleed. At 3 potency, she also inflicts 1 more bleed potency and count with effects, and that applies to either type of infliction, so if an effect says inflict 1 bleed count, you're actually inflicting 2 count and 1 potency. And lastly, at 4 potency, it gives an additional 1 base power. She relies very heavily on this effect in order to be very powerful, so increasing her Corpus Ingredient potency is very important to do. This is especially true for bleed teams because she is very good at inflicting bleed, probably the 3rd best after Honglu and Kurakumo Heathcliff. Another thing that reaching 2 Corpus Ingredient potency does is change her form and all of her base skills into another mode. The default form she is in at the start of an encounter is Iron Maiden, which gives 4 aggro every turn, as well as 1 protection, 5 defense level up, and 5% of her max HP as shield. It also makes it so that after the final coin of an attacker's skill, she deals pierce damage to the attacker by 20% of the damage she took from that coin, as well as inflicting them with 2 bleed count, and this can happen up to 3 times per turn. This is actually an insanely good effect for tanking, as you can take weak attacks to force damage and more bleed count onto enemies, and she doesn't take very much damage in this form to begin with. Once you gain Fascia, it changes to the Self-Unbound Flow State form instead, which changes all of her base skills, increases her min and max speed by 2 each, making her speed range 5 to 8, and lets her deal 20% more damage against enemies who are slower than her. She also gets forcefully unstaggered if she was staggered when the form change triggers. Needless to say, her damage and clashing ability skyrockets once you get to this mode, as well as her bleed infliction thanks to Fascia, at the trade-off of being a bit squishier. But it isn't too much of a downside because she's actually plenty bulky even without Iron Maiden. Her field passive doubles the boost she receives from Somatic Frisson-inspired Melody, which grants 1 min and max speed, 1 clash power to base skills, and 10% damage. This is an effect that can only be applied to her by Honglu, but it does make her a hell of a lot more consistent and powerful. The other part of the effect that makes her heal 4 SP at skill end, provided that skill inflicts a negative effect to the target, or gives up to 1 slash damage up per turn if she's already at 45 SP. SP acceleration is always incredibly good on any ID, and the 4 lusts needed to activate the passive should be no big deal in any bleed team, but may take slightly longer if you'd prefer to use her anywhere else. And the double boost from the other buff is also crazy good. Lastly, her support passive is great for Envy Resonance teams, allowing them to inflict a ton of bleed or bleed count when they get hit. It's basically specifically designed for the middle IDs to take advantage of, so that their bleed conditionals can be met easier. I wouldn't call it required, but it's definitely very helpful in that team setup. In Iron Maiden, her defense skill is Exhibition Arrangements, a 4-14 rolling Lust clashable guard that basically functions as she would if she were getting hit when it wins a clash, inflicting bleed count and dealing pierce damage to the attacker. Having a defense skill that also helps with building SP by clashing and inflicting your preferred status is also incredibly useful. The only real issue is it being her only skill that can't gain Corpus Ingredient, but it does allow her to contribute to Lust Resonance on demand, so there's a little bit of give and take with it. In Flow State, instead becomes the Exhibition Begins, a 4 to 14 rolling Lust Evade. On top of giving her 1 haste and inflicting 1 bind to the attacker if it successfully evades, it also gives her 1 assist defense at combat start. The last Faust ID that could gain assist defense is still probably the best ID in the game, and any ID that can gain this effect is immediately suspect for being broken, but it does depend on the skill it uses. In this case, it uses no acts of vandalism allowed, a 4 to 12 rolling /lust clashable counter, with 2 coins that can become up to a 4 to 16 based on the target's bleed, or up to 8 to 18 with the full effects of Fascia. It also gains clash power, and the second coin becomes unbreakable by spending 5 Corpus Ingredient. It's a lot stronger than it normally looks, thanks to all of the outside effects that factor into it. The 30% damage boost from the target having a variety of effects is very easy to max out and bleed, and this skill inflicts a lot of bleed provided it actually hits both times. While not quite as broken as the other assist defense user, this is an incredibly strong skill that you're likely to get a lot of use out of. Also important to note, this is her only skill that has a coin power conditional on her entire kit, which sounds bad but is actually so much less of a problem for her than you'd expect, as she gains a ton of clash and final power instead. Her skill 1 is Butcher Ribs, a 3 to 11 rolling /gluttony skill with 2 coins that can become up to a 6 to 14 based on the target's bleed and gains up to 2 clash power if the target has a variety of debuffs. And by a variety, I mean literally 2 debuffs. While it only reaches 16 in a clash, just barely missing the 17 power breakpoint, having a low range of 8 is insanely powerful in any fight, as it's incredibly consistent for clashing. And it also inflicts enough negative effects to fully gain the clash power that it has on its own. And even though the defense level down is once per turn, that's still about 5% extra damage for any ally attacking the same target. In Flow State, it is a 3 to 11 rolling /gluttony skill with 2 coins that can roll up to a 6 to 14 based on the target's bleed, or an 8 to 16 with full Fascia benefits. The only actual change to this skill is that instead of gaining clash power, it can deal up to 30% additional damage instead, making it a suspiciously high damaging skill 1 for how it appears once you factor in all of her other damaging buffs. In Iron Maiden, her skill 2 is Fascia Hungers, a 4 to 16 rolling /envy skill with 3 coins that can become up to an 8 to 20 based on the target's bleed, as well as gaining up to 3 clash power by the types of debuffs on the target and by spending Corpus Ingredient. The only unfortunate part about her kit is her not being able to spend Corpus Ingredient until she has 10 or more, and the actual buffs for spending it are not that significant outside of the ones provided by Fascia. This is her only skill to be able to gain Corpus Ingredient aside from her passive, so this is the best skill to start a fight with, so you can more easily reach 10 count, so you can start ramping her up by spending it on turn 2. And by faster, I mean it will always be at least 10 count by the end of the turn, provided that this skill hits on turn 1. It also inflicts Bind, which is useful in any situation. In Flow State, it is Time for Your Meal Fascia instead. A 4 to 16 rolling /envy skill with 3 coins that can become up to an 8 to 20 based on the target's bleed, or 10 to 22 with full Fascia benefits. It also gains haste in addition to inflicting Bind, and the debuff variety on the target once again gives up to a 30% damage boost. While her base attack skills don't change that much once she enters Flow State, they end up doing a lot more damage without losing any of the consistency that they originally had. In fact, they usually gain more utility a lot of the time too. In Iron Maiden, her skill 3 is Repressed Flesh, a 4 to 16 rolling /lust skill with 4 coins that can become up to a 10 to 22 based on the target's bleed, and if it spends Corpus Ingredient. It spends all of her Corpus Ingredient and deals up to 60% more damage based on how much was spent, meaning the optimal skill rotation for her is skill 2 on turn 1 into skill 3 on turn 2 in order to immediately gain Fascia as soon as possible. The skill inflicts the very rare damage down effect to the target as well as Bind, and the final coin deals up to an additional 30% more damage based on the target's negative effects. It also features her only way to inflict bleed potency outside of Flow State. If this was her only skill 3, it would be incredibly good, outpacing those of other IDs very easily, but it's not, and this is the skill that actually changes a lot from this version. In Flow State, it becomes Liberation of the Repressed Flesh, a 4 to 16 rolling /lust skill with 4 coins that can become up to a 9 to 21 based on the target's bleed and if it spends Corpus Ingredient, or 11 to 23 with all fascia bonuses, and spending Corpus Ingredient also makes it fully unbreakable. It gains less damage than the other skill 3 to compensate for all the other damage buffs she passively gets, and can gain up to 2 attack weight based on her Corpus Ingredient potency, additionally gaining more damage if you don't have enough targets. It additionally gains haste and slash damage up on its hits, and keep in mind that it inflicts a ton more bleed once you have 3 Corpus Ingredient potency. This skill is just insanely good all around, dealing massive damage, inflicting a ton of bleed to multiple targets, and giving her bonus utility on the following turn. Even if it loses a clash, thanks to the Unbreakable coin conditional usually always being met after the first couple turns. This ID has a few useful ego, the most important of which being Hex Nail, which she can perfectly fuel and inflicts a variety of lasting debuffs for the Ring IDs to take advantage of. Plus, this ID is very fast, meaning an overclocked Hex Nail can very easily be taken advantage of by your entire party. Telepole is great for this ID as a way to gain a lot of Corpus Ingredient while also buffing allies, and the passive damage bonus is really nice. You'll want to get to at least 3 before using it though, since it will slow down her potency gain due to it reducing the amount of Corpus Ingredient she ends up spending. She also fuels Fluid Sac really well, which is still amazing for healing the party, even if it doesn't clash super high. With how complicated Faust was, you'd be forgiven for thinking that the House of Spiders, the Ring Nursefather Honglu was more complicated, but since he doesn't have any alternative modes, he's actually quite a bit simpler, though he has his own intricacies to make up for it. His Corpus Ingredient mechanics are exactly the same as Faust's, with the exception that he gains artwork tibia instead of fascia, which is functionally identical aside from being able to grant a third base power once you reach 5 Corpus Ingredient potency. It's still an incredibly solid effect that you want to gain as soon as quickly as possible. His unique mechanic is viewing the tableau, which he starts every encounter with 21 of. It reduces by 2 at turn end, and by 1 every time a ring ally uses a skill, once per turn per ally. It also grants him 2 protection if Faust is on the field with him. The same passive also gives him a free recovery from stagger at the end of the turn, which is always great, especially for IDs who are a little bit less bulky than the ID they're intended to be used with. Once viewing the tableau hits 0, he will add a copy of Closing Time Installation Art No. 1 Your Flesh and Bones as the gallery's seats to his upcoming skills for the next turn. This skill can only be used once per encounter, though you can hold it on the dashboard, and replacing it with a defense skill will cause it to be added back on the next turn afterwards. It is a 3 to 23 rolling/lust skill with 5 unbreakable coins and 3 attack weight that can roll as high as a 5 to 25 before tibia and gains up to 2 attack weight by spending Corpus Ingredient. After tibia, it can roll as high as 8 to 28. Using it is how you apply Somatic Frisson inspired melody, and that applies to all Ring IDs, including the pointillists that were added much earlier in the game's lifespan, and even himself. It does this at attack end, as well as healing 10 SP for them. The skill itself is actually incredibly similar to Faust's Flow State Skill 3, inflicting all the same debuffs and buffs, though 1 less bleed potency, and the final coin randomly inflicts 5 burn, just like Index He Sang did, which means I now have 2 nickels. Strange. It also inflicts a new debuff exclusive to Honglu called Corpus Theater. This is not the primary way he'll be inflicting this effect, but it lasts for 3 activations, and making it so that every time the unit with it has bleed inflicted to them, it will randomly do one of 3 things next turn. It will inflict 3 bleed, 1 defense power down, or 1 bind, and if you manage to get the 3 bleed part frequently, it will stack your bleed on enemies really quickly, since most bleed IDs inflict bleed with almost every coin. And keep in mind this skill can apply this effect to 3 to 5 enemies at once, and you want it to be inflicted as often as possible in order to inflict as much bleed as possible to all enemies. And the bind and defense power down are also really nice to inflict, just less important than the bleed. Onto his field passive, the second half is identical to Faust with the exception that his can activate 3 times per turn instead of just 2 for the SP gain, making his SP build really fast as long as he can inflict debuffs, and he definitely can. The first half only applies if Faust is on the field, meaning they both have effects that require the other to be on the field to take advantage of. It makes it so that before using Faust Skill 3, you will target her using My How We Love the Flesh and Blood, a 4 to 8 rolling/pride skill with 1 coin that doesn't actually deal any damage. Instead, it applies 6 offense level up to her, which makes her skill 3 and any skill she uses thereafter for the turn much more powerful for both damage and clashing. It's also a free pride resource, which helps a lot with fueling some very important bleed ego. For that reason, it is much better than just applying the offense level up directly. His support passive is strangely bad, or at least underwhelming. It applies 2 offense level down and 1 bleed count next turn to the fastest enemy at the end of the turn, which, while useful for activating the ring's effects, you're sacrificing a ring unit to take advantage of it. And 1 bleed count and 2/3 of a single clash power just isn't going to benefit most teams very much. It's much better to just have this ID in your team if you're running bleed. His defense skill is Curating the Exhibition, a 4-14 rolling Lust Evade which is identical to Faust's Flow State Evade, even down to gaining 1 assist defense. Evades are always insanely good on their own, but the assist defense skill is really what matters here. His assist defense skill is Please, Vandalism is Prohibited, a 4-12 rolling / Lust clashable counter with 2 coins that can become up to a 4-16 based on the target's bleed, or up to a 7-19 with full tibia benefits. It gains 1 clash power and the last coin becomes unbreakable if it spends Corpus Ingredient. In fact, this skill is also identical to Faust's Flow State Assist Defense, with the only difference being that he doesn't actually need tibia in order to be able to use it. It's a really solid skill, and thankfully this is where their similarities become not so exact when it comes to their skills, though they are still very similar. Anatomize is a 3-11 rolling / pride skill with 2 coins that can become up to a 6-14 if the target has enough bleed, or a 9-17 with full tibia benefits. His skills function very similar to Faust's Flow State set of skills, but he differentiates himself by inflicting a lot more bleed potency than count. Like, a lot more potency. 4 bleed potency is a really high amount for any effect on a skill 1, and remember that this becomes 5 potency and 1 count at 3 or more Corpus Ingredient potency, making it insane for infliction, and it's his skill 1. All around, it's crazy powerful for a skill 1. Gather Ingredient Blood-Bathed Objet is a 4-16 rolling / envy skill with 3 coins that can become up to an 8-20 based on the target's bleed, or 11-23 with full tibia benefits. Just like with Faust, this is the best skill to open with as it guarantees you can start spending Corpus Ingredient on turn 2 thanks to it gaining Corpus Ingredient, and this is regardless of the number of ring allies you bring. This skill is really powerful, and also almost identical to Faust's skill 2 in Flow State, but it has one really important difference on the only coin that can become unbreakable. If the target has 5 or more types of negative effects, it will use an additional skill against the same target, generating an additional resource and dealing way more damage in total. Installation Art number 3 Improvised Ribcage is a 5-13 rolling Pierce Envy skill with 2 coins that can become up to an 8-16 with full tibia benefits. It spends some Corpus Ingredient for free and does not trigger defense skills. The second hit has a big damage conditional and also heals his own SP, which is really nice, but most importantly, it inflicts Corpus Theater, and is the primary way to do so. You always want to have Corpus Theater on a target you're stacking bleed on, just to reiterate, and it also counts as a separate debuff for your ring conditionals. This additional skill is one of the big things making Honglu a really competent damage dealer, as it deals a huge amount of damage for what is very little effort and very little actual team building necessary to get the effect to actually work. Tibia's Melody, Anatomization of the Unanatomized by the Anatomized, is a 4-16 rolling / lust skill with 4 coins that can become up to a 9-21 based on the target's bleed and by spending Corpus Ingredient, or 12-24 with full tibia benefits. It's literally identical to Faust's Flow State skill 3 in every way, including the gain to attack weight. While it does make them disappointingly similar once Faust is in Flow State, there is something to be said about having what is essentially 2 of the same ID on the field at the same time, especially for an ID that is this overwhelmingly strong once they get ramped up. That, and outside of their skill 3, Honglu actually does differentiate himself a lot through his bonus skills generating a lot of extra resources, providing a faction-wide buff, and inflicting a ton of bleed potency on his skill 1. There are 2 ego important to point out for this ID. He perfectly fuels Roseate Desire, which is an underwhelming skill for damage, but inflicts a lot of defense level down for additional damage for your party, and the passive is actually usable in a bleed team since Lust damage is going to be very common, and Lust Fragility will be easy to take advantage of as a result. The other more important one is Dimension Shredder, which can be perfectly fueled by Faust and Honglu together, which gives haste and inflicts fragile, as well as being a way to gain some corpus ingredient quickly. The Corrosion is also positive coin and is a way to quickly spend 10 corpus ingredient, which is great for quickly building up corpus ingredient potency to gain benefits from Tibia. On top of that, the passive gives him even more corpus ingredient and can save him from death once per encounter. Honglu isn't the most frail ID, but you can be caught off guard by enemies sometimes, so it's still a nice effect to have. These are a pair of IDs that are very easy to place into a bleed team. Bringing the pair alongside Yi Sang and even Otis's Ring IDs will make it easy to inflict a lot of different debuffs and deal very heavy damage as a result. I will say that Otis struggles with clashing nowadays, but is still a pretty solid ID overall. That said, getting rid of viewing the tableau on Honglu isn't really a thing you need to prioritize, since doing so too fast will let you take full advantage of Tibia using Honglu's crazy AoE that he gains from doing so. These are not Tremor IDs, but Tremor is a status that is very easy to maintain in order to keep your debuff conditionals active. So both Night Owl's Gregor and Contempt R Ryoshu are great IDs to pair along with them. They also each can apply their own persistent debuff that also contributes to your conditionals, and are just generally amazing IDs, especially Gregor, who gets additional attacks like crazy, even if they do eat into your bleed count a little bit more by bursting Tremor. If you're looking for the best bleed infliction possible, then the pair of Kurakumo, Ishmael, and Heathcliff, and then maybe even a third such as Ryoshu or Gregor, is also going to be great, as the Kurakumo IDs are the best inflictors of bleed outside of the ring, and work very well alongside them. Your assist defense might make Heathcliff a little bit less consistent for damage, but you get an additional attack either way, so it probably won't matter too much in the long run. Plus, they all inflict a ton of debuffs, and Heathcliff and Ishmael both also benefit from having a variety of debuffs on the enemies, just like the Ring IDs. Every single Bloodfiend ID also pairs really well with them. They aren't as bleed-y as most other bleed IDs, but the huge amount of bleed infliction that Honglu provides specifically is going to help build up Blood Feast a lot faster to fulfill Bloodfiend conditionals really quickly. Rodion and Merceau are the most important two in this case, as they buff each other. Merceau buffs the entire team, and Rodion has Sanguine Desire, which is the most important ego for any bleed team, being the easiest way to stack bleed and deal insane amounts of damage using it. They also benefit a ton from having Lobotomy Ego AEDD Gregor being in the team. He provides them with extra corpus ingredient every turn, inflicts 2 different debuffs in Photoelectricity and Charge Sting. In fact, both of Honglu's skill 2s benefit from the improve effect of Charge Sting, making him great to bring along with in order to accelerate the other 2. You can also bring Red Eyes and Penitence Ryoshu as the third ID to benefit from Gregor, as she inflicts a really good amount of bleed potency in addition to being a charge ID. And lastly, both of these units can function really well in Envy Resonance. They don't have a skill on demand in their main kit, but they do both have a skill 2 that is Envy, and the ability to use an Envy Ego to contribute to Envy Resonance. Any of the middle IDs, Magical Girl Don Quixote, and W Corp Otis all come together to function pretty well alongside these 2 IDs. And that's all I have to say about them. Both of these IDs are easy S tier and will make any team a lot more dangerous. I have both in my company if you'd want to try them out before pulling for them. It took me 200 pulls just to get Faust, and I had to pity Honglu. So if your luck is like mine, probably just wait and shard them, but if you have good luck, this is a great banner to pull on. Let me know what you think about them down below, as I always like hearing what other people think of new releases. Be sure to like and subscribe, as it helps me out a lot. Thank you for watching my video. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I hope to see you again soon.